Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today we're diving into one of the most fascinating political gatherings of 2025 in South Africa, the National Dialogue Convention, which took place at UNISA's Muckleneuk campus in Pretoria. What was billed as a historic moment of collective nation-building turned into a mix of high drama, walkouts, tense disagreements, and yet, also a surprising spirit of hope. It's a story about who showed up, who didn't, and why it matters for the country's fragile democracy. The convention brought together more than 200 delegates, representing about 30 sectors of society. This wasn't just a room of politicians, it included youth movements, business leaders, labor unions, religious organizations, and civil society groups. One of the strongest presences came from Women for Change, a nonprofit that has been pushing hard for gender-based violence to be recognized as a national crisis. Their participation reminded everyone that this wasn't only about politics and economics. It was also about the lives of ordinary South Africans, especially women and children facing violence every day. Now, on the surface, it sounds like a powerful, diverse coalition. But here's where the drama began. Not everyone was on board. The Thabo Mbeki Foundation, among others, criticized the convention for what they saw as poor planning and weak inclusivity. Their argument was simple: you cannot claim to represent grassroots voices if your delegates are mostly elites and insiders. They went as far as to call the process misleading, saying it risks losing credibility unless rescheduled and rebuilt from the ground up. That is no small criticism, especially when it comes from a foundation bearing the name of a former president. And they weren't the only skeptics. Political parties like the DA, ActionSA, and the Freedom Front Plus either pulled out entirely or sent observers instead of full delegations. Their complaints were not about gender-based violence or social issues but about governance and transparency. They wanted answers: who is funding this, who is steering it, and is the ANC quietly using the platform to polish its image and tighten its grip on the national agenda? These doubts hung over the event like a heavy shadow, reminding everyone of how deeply mistrust still runs in our politics. Still, the organizers refused to let the withdrawals derail the process. Vincent Magwenya, the president's spokesperson, insisted that the absence of certain foundations or parties doesn't mean the absence of the people. He argued that South Africa is too broad, too complex, to expect every voice in one room. The convention, he said, should be judged by the long-term outcomes, not by the short-term list of who came and who didn't. Boichoko Dietlhek, the chair of the organizing committee, struck a similar chord. He reminded everyone that dialogue is not about instant solutions but about building trust and setting a common agenda. And then came the turning point. Linda Mazibuko, deputy co-chair of the Eminent Persons Group, delivered a closing reflection that resonated with many. She admitted openly that this convention would not provide all the answers. But that was never its purpose. It was meant to plant the seed of a citizen-led conversation, one that belongs not to politicians or institutions, but to the people themselves. Her words, "This dialogue is owned by the people," were echoed by delegates who broke into song at the end of the session. It was a symbolic moment, mixing solemnity with optimism, reminding South Africans that even amid division, there is space for shared hope. But we must ask, what does all of this really mean? On one level, it shows the challenges of consensus building in a fractured democracy. South Africa is wrestling with mistrust of government, disillusionment with political parties, and frustrations over service delivery, unemployment, and inequality. A convention like this was always going to carry those tensions into the room. The withdrawals from major organizations reflect just how fragile the national fabric remains. On another level, though, the diversity of those who did attend, youth activists, women's organizations, labor representatives, faith leaders, shows that there is still energy among ordinary citizens to push for change from the ground up. While political parties play chess, South Africans are still willing to come together in spaces like this to imagine a better future. That is no small achievement in itself. Humor also found its way into the commentary, because, of course, this is South Africa. On social media, some joked that the DA pulled out because they were worried about sitting too close to the EFF, while others quipped that Mbeki might start his own dialogue convention just to show how it's properly done. The hashtags trended, memes circulated, but beneath the laughter was the same old truth: South Africans take politics seriously, but they never lose their sharp sense of humor. So, was this convention a success or a failure? That depends on how you measure it. If success is defined as a perfect picture of national unity, then clearly it fell short. Too many key players stayed away, and too many suspicions went unanswered. But if success is planting the seed of an ongoing citizen-led conversation, then perhaps it achieved its first small victory. The challenge will be whether the outcomes of this dialogue lead to actual policies, reforms, and tangible changes, or whether it becomes another talk shop that fades into history. And now the question comes back to you, the viewers. Do you think the National Dialogue Convention can rebuild trust in South Africa's democracy, or was it just another stage for political posturing? Should it have been postponed to include more voices, or was it better to move forward with whoever was willing to participate? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update on South Africa's political drama and debates. That's all for today's video. Thank you for watching, and remember, the story of South Africa is still being written, sometimes in tension, sometimes in song, but always with the voices of its people. See you next time.